Some love stories begin with grand gestures and romantic declarations. Others start in the quiet corners of ordinary moments, where dedication speaks louder than words ever could. This is the story of Marcus Chun, a night janitor whose quiet acts of care would transform not just an office space, but two hearts that had forgotten how to trust and love. In a world where people rush past each other without a second glance, where corporate buildings stand cold and impersonal after hours, one man's simple devotion to his work would become something far more profound. Sarah Martinez had built walls around her heart after years of disappointment, focusing entirely on her demanding career as a marketing executive. She never imagined that the person who would finally break through those barriers would be someone she initially never even noticed. What started as professional courtesy in empty hallways after midnight would slowly bloom into something neither of them expected. This is their story, a testament to how love often arrives not with fireworks, but with the gentle persistence of someone who sees value in the smallest details of your world. Marcus Chun pushed his cleaning cart through the marble lobby of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions at exactly 10:30 p.m., just as he had every weeknight for the past 3 years. The building stood like a glass monument against the Seattle skyline, its 42 floors housing some of the city's most successful businesses. During the day, it buzzed with the energy of hundreds of employees rushing between meetings, phone calls, and deadlines. But at night, it became Marcus's domain. At 28, Marcus had never imagined himself working as a night janitor. He had graduated from the University of Washington with a degree in computer science, full of dreams about creating the next revolutionary app or landing a coveted position at one of the tech giants that called Seattle home. But life had other plans. His father's sudden illness had drained the family's savings, and his younger sister's college tuition needed to be paid. The night shift at Premier Cleaning Services offered decent pay, full health benefits, and the flexibility to take online programming courses during his downtime. What Marcus hadn't expected was how much he would come to appreciate the solitude of his work. There was something peaceful about moving through empty offices, restoring order to spaces that had been disrupted by the chaos of daily business. He took pride in his work, treating each office not just as another room to clean, but as someone's personal workspace that deserved respect and care. The 38th floor was always his favorite. It housed the executive offices of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, and unlike the cramped cubicles on lower floors, these spaces had character. Large windows offered breathtaking views of Elliott Bay, and the offices were decorated with personal touches that spoke to the personalities of their occupants. Marcus had learned to read these spaces like stories, understanding the people who worked there through the items they chose to display and the way they organized their desks. Room 3847 belonged to Sarah Martinez, Senior Marketing Director. Marcus could tell she was a perfectionist by the way her desk was always immaculately organized before she left each evening. Her pens were arranged by color in a small ceramic holder that looked handmade, probably a gift from someone special. A small succulent plant sat by her window, its pot decorated with a child's handprint, and the words "Best Mom Ever" painted in uneven letters. Family photos were carefully positioned to be visible from her chair, but not intrusive to visitors. What struck Marcus most about Sarah's office was the evidence of her long hours. Coffee rings stained her desk pad, and there were always crumpled energy bar wrappers in her trash can. Post-it notes covered her computer monitor with reminders and deadlines, and her jacket usually hung on the back of her chair, suggesting she often stayed late into the evening. Sometimes, when Marcus arrived for his shift, the lingering scent of her perfume still hung in the air, something floral and light that made him think of spring gardens. Marcus had only seen Sarah in person a handful of times during his 3 years at the building. She was usually leaving as he was arriving, rushing past him in the lobby with her phone pressed to her ear and her laptop bag slung over her shoulder. She was beautiful in a professional, polished way, with dark hair always pulled back in a neat bun and clothes that spoke of success and confidence. But there was something in her eyes that Marcus recognized, a tiredness that went deeper than just working late hours. On this particular Tuesday evening, Marcus noticed something different as he approached Sarah's office. The light was still on, and he could see her silhouette through the frosted glass door. She was slumped over her desk, her head resting on her folded arms. At first, he thought she might be working on something, but as he got closer, he realized she had fallen asleep. Marcus stood outside her door, unsure of what to do. His training had been clear about not disturbing employees who might still be in the building, but he was also concerned. It was nearly 11 o'clock, and sleeping at a desk couldn't be comfortable. He knocked gently on the door frame, but Sarah didn't stir. Through the glass, he could see her more clearly than ever before. Her hair had come loose from its usual bun, and strands fell across her face. Her blazer was wrinkled, and there were papers scattered around her, as if she had been working intensely on something before exhaustion overtook her. On her desk, he noticed an empty coffee cup and what looked like the remains of a vending machine sandwich, apparently her dinner. Marcus made a decision. He quietly entered the office and placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said softly. "Mom." Sarah startled awake, lifting her head and looking around in confusion. When her eyes focused on Marcus, he saw a moment of vulnerability cross her face before her professional mask snapped back into place. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, immediately beginning to gather her scattered papers. "I didn't realize how late it was. I'll get out of your way, so you can clean." "There's no rush," Marcus replied, stepping back to give her space. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay. It's pretty late." Sarah glanced at her watch and groaned. "It's after 11? I was supposed to meet my sister for dinner at 9. She pulled out her phone and saw several missed calls and text messages. "She's going to kill me." Marcus watched as Sarah quickly called her sister, apologizing profusely and explaining she had lost track of time. Her voice carried a note of genuine remorse that suggested this wasn't the first time work had interfered with her personal plans. When she hung up, she looked deflated. "Family dinner moved to tomorrow night," she said, more to herself than to Marcus. "Rain check number 5 this month." There was something about the way she said it that made Marcus's heart ache for her. He had grown up in a close-knit family where dinner together was sacred, where his mother would wait up no matter how late he came home from work or school. The idea of someone being so consumed by work that they regularly missed time with people they loved troubled him. "I should let you get back to work," Sarah said, packing up her laptop and gathering her things. "Sorry for keeping you from cleaning." "You didn't keep me from anything," Marcus assured her. "And if you don't mind me saying, you might want to consider heading home. This office will still be here tomorrow." Sarah paused in her packing and looked at him with surprise. It had probably been a long time since anyone had suggested she prioritize her well-being over her work. "You're probably right," she admitted. "I just have this presentation tomorrow, and everything has to be perfect." "I'm sure it already is," Marcus said. "For what I can see, you don't strike me as someone who does anything less than perfectly." A small smile crossed Sarah's face, the first genuine expression Marcus had seen from her. "You'd be surprised," she said. "Some days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water." It was a moment of honesty that surprised them both. Sarah seemed to realize she was sharing more than she intended with a man she barely knew, and Marcus felt honored that she had trusted him with even that small admission. "We all have those days," he said gently. "The important thing is not to let them drown you." Sarah finished packing her things in silence, but Marcus could sense that his words had resonated with her. As she headed toward the door, she turned back to him. "Thank you," she said. "For waking me up, I mean, and for listening." "Anytime," Marcus replied, and a minute after Sarah left, Marcus stood in her office for a moment, breathing in the faint scent of her perfume that lingered in the air. There was something about their brief interaction that had affected him more than he expected. Perhaps it was seeing her vulnerability or recognizing in her the same kind of dedication to responsibility that had shaped his own life. Whatever it was, he found himself hoping their paths would cross again. As he cleaned her office that night, Marcus paid extra attention to the details. He made sure her succulent plant was properly watered straightened the family photos that had been knocked askew during her long day, and even replaced the burnt-out bulb in her desk lamp that he had noticed flickering for weeks. It wasn't part of his job description, but something about caring for her space felt important. Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself looking forward to cleaning Sarah's office each night. He began to notice patterns in her work habits and moods based on the state of her workspace. When she was stressed, there were more coffee cups and less organization. When she was working on creative projects, colorful sketches and brainstorming notes would be scattered across her desk. When she was happy, she would leave small personal touches, a flower from the building's lobby arrangement, or a cheerful sticky note reminder to herself. Marcus started making small improvements to her office environment. He began bringing in better cleaning supplies that wouldn't leave streaks on her windows, ensuring she had the best possible view of the city each morning. He replaced the harsh fluorescent bulb above her desk with a warmer, more flattering light that he purchased with his own money. When her plant showed signs of distress, he researched proper care techniques and adjusted its position to get better light during the day. These weren't dramatic gestures, but quiet acts of care that he hoped would make her working days a little brighter. He never expected recognition or thanks. The satisfaction came from knowing that he was contributing to her well-being in some small way. 3 weeks after their first conversation, Marcus encountered Sarah again. This time, she wasn't asleep, but was sitting on the floor of her office, surrounded by presentation boards and looking frustrated. It was nearly midnight, and she appeared to be having some kind of creative crisis. "Rough night?" Marcus asked from the doorway. Sarah looked up and, to his surprise, seemed relieved to see him. "The roughest," she admitted. "I'm presenting to our biggest potential client tomorrow, and nothing is coming together the way it should. I've been at this for 14 hours, and I think I'm making it worse instead of better." Marcus entered the office and looked at the presentation materials spread around her. Even to his untrained eye, they looked professional and impressive, but he could see the perfectionist's dissatisfaction in Sarah's expression. "Sometimes stepping away helps," he suggested. "When I was in college, I used to get stuck on programming problems for hours. The solution usually came to me when I was doing something completely different." "You went to college?" Sarah asked, and then immediately looked embarrassed by her surprise. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sound." "It's okay," Marcus said with a smile. "I know it's probably not what you'd expect from someone pushing a cleaning cart. Computer science degree from UW. Actually," Sarah's eyebrows rose. "That's impressive. What brought you to night cleaning?" Marcus found himself sharing more of his story than he usually did with anyone. He told her about his father's illness, his sister's education, and his hope to eventually transition back into technology work. Sarah listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and showing none of the condescension he sometimes encountered when people learned about his background. "That's really admirable," she said when he finished. "Not many people would make those kinds of sacrifices for their family." "I think most people would," Marcus replied. "When you love someone, you do what needs to be done." There was something in the way he said it that made Sarah pause. She had been so focused on her career for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone prioritize relationships over personal ambition. The reminder stirred something in her that she had buried deep. "Maybe you could help me see this with fresh eyes," she said suddenly. "I've been staring at it so long that I can't tell if it's brilliant or terrible anymore." Marcus was surprised by the request, but he sat down on the floor beside her and looked at her presentation materials. Sarah explained her concept and the client's needs, and Marcus found himself drawn into the creative problem-solving process. His technology background gave him a different perspective on her marketing strategies, and he asked questions that helped her see new angles she hadn't considered. For the next hour, they worked together on refining her presentation. Marcus made suggestions that were practical and innovative, while Sarah's expertise shaped his ideas into viable marketing solutions. It was a collaboration neither of them had expected, but it felt natural and productive. "This is actually working," Sarah said, looking at their revised concept with genuine excitement. "You have a really good instinct for this." "It helps to have someone explain it who actually knows what they're talking about," Marcus replied. You're really talented at what you do." As they worked, Marcus found himself increasingly drawn to Sarah's passion for her work and her sharp intelligence. She approached problems with creativity and determination, and when she smiled at a breakthrough moment, her whole face lit up in a way that took his breath away. Sarah, meanwhile, was discovering that beneath Marcus's quiet professionalism was a thoughtful, capable man who saw the world from interesting angles. When they finally finished, it was past 1 in the morning. Sarah's presentation was transformed, and she felt more confident about the next day's meeting than she had in weeks. "I can't thank you enough," she said as she packed up her materials. "You probably just saved my job." "I doubt your job was ever in danger," Marcus replied. "But I'm glad I could help." As Sarah prepared to leave, she hesitated at the door. "Marcus," she said, "would you mind if I asked you something?" "Of course. Why do you take such good care of my office?" "I mean, everything is always perfect when I come in each morning. The plan is healthy, the windows are spotless, even my desk lamp is better than it used to be. That's not just standard cleaning service, is it?" Marcus felt his cheeks warm. He hadn't realized his extra efforts were so noticeable. "I guess I just believe that everyone deserves to work in an environment that supports them," he said carefully. "Your office tells me that you work really hard and care about doing things well. I wanted to make sure the space matched that energy." Sarah stared at him for a moment, processing his words. In her corporate world, people rarely did anything without expecting something in return. The idea that someone would quietly improve her working environment simply because they thought she deserved it was almost foreign to her. "That's incredibly thoughtful," she said softly. "I don't think anyone has ever paid attention to what I needed like that." There was a weight to her words that suggested she wasn't just talking about her office. Marcus sensed there was a story there, probably involving people who had taken more than they had given, but he didn't pry. "Everyone deserves to have someone notice," he said instead. Sarah left that night with more than just a polished presentation. She carried with her the beginning of a new awareness. That kindness without expectation of reward still existed in the world, and that had been quietly surrounding her in ways she had never noticed before. The next morning, Sarah's presentation was a tremendous success. The client signed a contract worth more than $2 million, and her boss praised her innovative approach and creative thinking. But as she accepted congratulations from colleagues throughout the day, Sarah found herself thinking not about her professional triumph, but about the man who had helped make it possible. That evening, for the first time in months, Sarah made a point to leave the office before 10 o'clock. She wanted to go home, call her sister, and maybe even get a full night's sleep. But as she gathered her things, she found herself hoping that her path would cross with Marcus's again soon. Marcus, arriving for his shift, noticed immediately that Sarah had left earlier than usual. Her office felt different somehow, less stressed, more settled. On her desk, he found a small note written on her personal stationery. "Thank you for helping me see clearly last night. The presentation was a huge success. I owe you dinner when you have time. Sarah." At the bottom of the note was her personal phone number. Marcus read the note 3 times, hardly believing what he was seeing. In his world, successful executives didn't offer to buy dinner for night janitors, no matter how helpful they had been. But Sarah had done exactly that, and something about the way she had phrased it suggested she genuinely wanted to spend time with him, not just fulfill an obligation. For the first time in 3 years of working the night shift, Marcus found himself looking forward to something beyond just getting through another evening of cleaning. He carefully tucked Sarah's note into his wallet, next to a photo of his family, and continued with his work with a lightness in his step that hadn't been there before. As he cleaned her office that night, Marcus paid even more attention to the small details than usual. He wanted everything to be perfect for Sarah's return the next day, not just because it was his job, but because he was beginning to care about her happiness in ways that went far beyond professional duty. Neither Sarah nor Marcus could have predicted that their late-night encounter would be the beginning of something that would change both of their lives forever. But as Marcus finished cleaning the 38th floor and Sarah settled into her apartment across town, both of them were thinking about the unexpected connection they had discovered in the quiet hours after midnight. The corporate world rarely allows space for authentic human connection, but sometimes in the margins of ordinary days, extraordinary relationships begin to bloom. For Sarah and Marcus, that blooming had just begun. Sarah stared at her phone for the third time that Thursday afternoon, scrolling through her contacts until she found Marcus's name. She had entered his number after he had finally responded to her dinner invitation 2 days earlier, but now that the time had come to actually make plans, she found herself unexpectedly nervous. The success of her presentation had earned her a promotion and a substantial raise, but more importantly, it had given her a new perspective on collaboration and asking for help. Marcus's contribution had been invaluable, not just in terms of practical suggestions, but in his ability to see her work from a completely different angle. She wanted to thank him properly, but she also found herself curious about the man who had been quietly caring for her workspace for months without her notice. She finally gathered the courage to call him around 4 o'clock, timing it for what she hoped would be before he left for work, but after he had presumably gotten some sleep. His voice when he answered was warm and slightly surprised. "Sarah, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," she said quickly. "Great, actually. I got promoted partly because of how well that presentation went, so thank you again for your help." "That's wonderful news," Marcus replied, and she could hear the genuine pleasure in his voice. "Congratulations. You earned that." "About that dinner I mentioned," Sarah continued, pushing through her unusual nervousness. "Are you free Saturday evening? I know a place that makes incredible seafood, and I'd love to take you there if you're interested." There was a pause, and Sarah worried she had overstepped somehow. In her corporate world, business dinners were common, but she was beginning to realize that what she was proposing might feel different to Marcus. "I'd like that very much," Marcus finally said, "but only if you let me contribute somehow. Maybe we could split the check, or I could choose the restaurant. I appreciate the gesture, but I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything." Sarah smiled at his consideration. Most of the men in her professional circle would have jumped at the chance for an expensive dinner on someone else's tab, but Marcus was thinking about her comfort and his own dignity. It was refreshing and a little heartwarming. "How about this?" she proposed. "I'll choose the restaurant since I invited you, but you can pick what we do afterward. Maybe something you enjoy that I might not know about." "Deal," Marcus agreed, and she could hear the smile in his voice. They arranged to meet at Anthony's Pier 66, a waterfront restaurant with stunning views of Elliott Bay. Sarah chose it partly for the excellent food, but mostly because it was beautiful without being intimidatingly expensive, and the casual atmosphere would hopefully help them both feel comfortable. Saturday evening found Sarah standing in front of her closet, trying to decide what to wear. This wasn't a business dinner, but it wasn't exactly a date either. She had told herself it was simply a thank you meal between two people who had worked well together. But she couldn't ignore the flutter of anticipation in her stomach that suggested her feelings were more complicated than that. She finally settled on dark jeans, a soft blue sweater that brought out her eyes, and comfortable boots suitable for whatever Marcus had planned for after dinner. Looking at herself in the mirror, she realized it had been months since she had dressed for anything other than work or errands. The woman looking back at her seemed younger somehow, more relaxed than the corporate executive who wore power suits, and maintained perfect professional composure. Marcus was waiting outside the restaurant when she arrived, and Sarah's breath caught slightly when she saw him. Away from his work uniform, he looked different, more relaxed and confident, but also more attractive than she had allowed herself to notice before. He wore dark jeans and a green button-down shirt that complemented his olive skin tone, and his hair was styled instead of hidden under the baseball cap he wore while cleaning. "You look beautiful," he said when she approached, his tone matter-of-fact rather than flirtatious, as if he was simply stating an obvious truth. "Thank you," Sarah replied, feeling her cheeks warm. "You clean up pretty well yourself." They were seated at a table by the windows, where the setting sun painted Elliott Bay in shades of gold and orange. The initial awkwardness Sarah had feared didn't materialize. Instead, conversation flowed naturally as they shared appetizers and talked about everything from Seattle's restaurant scene to their favorite books and movies. Sarah learned that Marcus was an excellent listener who asked thoughtful questions and that he had a dry sense of humor that made her laugh more than she had in months. Marcus discovered that beneath Sarah's polished professional exterior was a woman who was passionate about art, devoted to her family, and surprisingly down-to-earth despite her corporate success. "I have to admit something," Sarah said over their main course. "Before that night, when you helped me with the presentation, I barely noticed you. I feel terrible about that now." "There's nothing terrible about it," Marcus replied. "I work nights specifically to avoid interactions with the day staff. Most people in your position don't even know the cleaning crew exists, let alone notice individuals." "But you noticed me," Sarah pointed out. "You knew about my plant, my work habits, even that I was having a stressful week based on the state of my office. How long have you been paying that much attention?" Marcus took a sip of his wine, considering his answer. "Probably longer than I should admit without sounding like a stalker," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "Your office was always different from the others. More personal, more cared for. I guess I became curious about the person who created such a thoughtful workspace." "Thoughtful," Sarah repeated, testing the word. "Most people would probably say obsessively organized or control freak's paradise. Those people would be wrong," Marcus said firmly. "Organization isn't the same as thoughtfulness, and your office isn't just organized. It's curated. Every item there serves a purpose or has meaning. That plant isn't just decoration. It's clearly from someone important to you. The photos aren't just randomly placed. They're positioned where you can see them when you need encouragement. Even your pen collection isn't just about having the right tools. It's about having options for different moods and tasks." Sarah stared at him in amazement. "I had no idea anyone could read so much from an office space." "I've had a lot of time to observe," Marcus said, "and I suppose I've always been interested in understanding what makes people tick. Spaces tell stories about their owners if you know how to look." "What does my space tell you about me?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious. Marcus was quiet for a moment, as if organizing his thoughts. "It tells me you care deeply about doing things well, that family is important to you even when work keeps you away from them, and that you carry a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. It also tells me that you're creative but practical, that you value beauty but don't indulge in it often, and that you work too hard because you're trying to prove something to someone." The accuracy of his assessment took Sarah's breath away. "That's remarkably perceptive," she said softly, "and mostly correct, which is a little unsettling." "I'm sorry if I overstepped," Marcus said quickly. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." "You didn't," Sarah assured him. "It's just been a long time since anyone paid that kind of attention to me. In my world, people notice my work, my results, my productivity. But nobody notices what I need or whether I'm taking care of myself." "What do you need?" Marcus asked, his tone gentle but direct. The question surprised Sarah. When was the last time someone had asked her that? More importantly, when was the last time she had asked herself? "I don't know," she admitted. "I've been so focused on what everyone else needs from me, my boss, my clients, my family, that I'm not sure I remember what I actually want anymore." "Maybe that's something worth figuring out," Marcus suggested. They finished dinner as the last light faded from the sky, and Sarah realized she was reluctant for the evening to end. "So what's this mysterious after-dinner activity you have planned?" she asked as they left the restaurant. Marcus smiled mysteriously. "Are you up for a little adventure? Nothing dangerous, but definitely different from your usual Saturday night, I'm guessing." "Lead the way," Sarah said, surprised by her own willingness to follow him into the unknown. Marcus led her to his car, a well-maintained Honda Civic that was practical rather than flashy. As they drove through downtown Seattle, Sarah watched the familiar city pass by her window and realized she rarely saw it from this angle. As a passenger with time to actually observe and appreciate her surroundings rather than rushing from one destination to another. They ended up at the Seattle Center, where Marcus parked near the International Fountain. "I know it's touristy," he said as they walked toward the fountain, "but there's something about this place at night that I find peaceful. Plus, they have live music tonight." The area around the fountain was dotted with small groups of people, some sitting on benches, others spread out on blankets on the grass. A local band was setting up near the fountain, preparing for what appeared to be an informal concert. The atmosphere was relaxed and welcoming, completely different from the upscale restaurants and networking events that usually constituted Sarah's social activities. "This is perfect," Sarah said, meaning it. "I drive past this place every day, but I don't think I've actually stopped to enjoy it in years." They found a spot on the grass where they could see both the fountain and the band. Marcus had brought a blanket from his car, and they settled in as the musicians began their first set. The music was folk rock, melodic, and soothing, and Sarah found herself relaxing in a way that felt almost foreign. "How did you discover this?" she asked, gesturing to the informal concert around them. "I stumbled across it a few months ago," Marcus explained. "I was feeling restless after work one night and decided to take a walk instead of going straight home. There was a different band playing, but the whole scene was so peaceful that I started coming back whenever I needed to clear my head." "You come here alone?" Sarah asked, trying to picture Marcus sitting by himself in this communal space. "Usually," he said without any trace of self-pity, "I've always been comfortable with my own company. Growing up with a sick father and a younger sister who needed a lot of attention, I learned early that sometimes you have to create your own quiet spaces." Sarah studied his profile as he watched the band. There was something about Marcus that she was beginning to recognize, a quality of self-sufficiency that came from taking care of others rather than being taken care of. It was familiar because she saw it in herself, but it was also heartbreaking because she understood the loneliness that often accompanied that kind of strength. "Do you ever wish you had made different choices?" she asked. "About college, your career, taking care of your family?" Marcus considered her question carefully. "I used to," he said finally. "When I first started the cleaning job, I felt like I was wasting my education and my potential. But I've come to realize that taking care of people, whether it's my family or the spaces where people work, isn't a waste of anything. It's actually taught me things about patience and attention to detail that my computer science classes never could. Such as the fact that small, consistent actions can have a bigger impact than grand gestures. The fact that noticing what people need, even when they don't ask for it, can make a real difference in their lives. And the fact that there's dignity in any work that's done with care and intention." Sarah felt something shift inside her as she listened to Marcus speak. His perspective was so different from the achievement-focused, competitive mindset that dominated her professional world. There was a groundedness to his philosophy that made her question some of the assumptions she had built her life around. "I'm not sure I could do what you've done," she said honestly. "Give up my own ambitions to take care of other people." "You already do," Marcus pointed out. "You sacrifice time with your family, your health, your personal relationships for your work. The only difference is that your sacrifices benefit a corporation instead of people you love." His words weren't critical, but they hit Sarah with the force of revelation. She had never thought of her workaholic tendencies as sacrifices for others, but Marcus was right. She was constantly giving up pieces of herself, just not for the people who mattered most. "That's a sobering way to put it," she said. "I didn't mean to be harsh," Marcus said quickly. "I just think you're more selfless than you give yourself credit for. You just need to redirect that energy sometimes." The band finished their first set, and during the break, Marcus and Sarah walked closer to the fountain. The water danced in coordinated patterns, illuminated by colored lights that shifted in rhythm with recorded music. Other couples and families had gathered around the fountain's edge, and children ran laughing through the mist that drifted from the water displays. "I used to bring my sister here when she was little," Marcus said, watching a small girl chase the fountain's spray patterns. She would try to predict where the water would go next, like it was some kind of puzzle she could solve. "Is she still in school?" Sarah asked. "She's in her senior year at UW, studying to be a teacher," Marcus said with obvious pride. "She wants to work with elementary kids, help them fall in love with learning the way our mom helped us." "Your mom sounds special." "She was," Marcus said quietly. "She died when I was in high school, but she was the kind of person who made everyone around her feel like they mattered. She used to say that the most important thing you could do for someone was to see them clearly, not just the surface stuff, but who they really were underneath. Sarah felt a pang of empathy for the loss Marcus had experienced, but also a flicker of recognition. She sounds like she would have been proud of the way you see people, she said. The way you saw me, even when I was too busy to see myself clearly. I think she would have liked you, Marcus replied. She always said that the most interesting people were the ones who worked hard but forgot to play. Forgot to play, Sarah repeated. Yeah, that sounds about right. They returned to their blanket as the band started their second set, this time with more upbeat songs that got some of the audience dancing. Sarah watched the uninhibited joy of the people around them and tried to remember the last time she had done something just for fun, without any professional or practical purpose. Can I ask you something that might be too personal? She said to Marcus. Sure. Are you happy? I mean, really happy with your life the way it is? Marcus was quiet for so long that Sarah worried she had crossed a line. Finally, he turned to look at her directly. I'm content, he said. I have work that pays my bills and serves a purpose, family members I love who are healthy and pursuing their dreams, and enough free time to enjoy simple pleasures like this. I'm not sure happiness is supposed to be more complicated than that. But don't you want more? Sarah pressed. Career advancement, financial success, recognition for your talents? I want my sister to graduate debt-free and my father to stay healthy, Marcus said. I want to eventually use my programming skills in a job that challenges me intellectually. And I want to find someone who understands that the best parts of life usually happen in quiet moments, not on grand stages. The last part of his answer made Sarah's heart skip slightly. She had spent so much of her adult life focused on achieving and acquiring that she had forgotten about the simple desire for understanding and companionship. What about you? Marcus asked. Are you happy? Sarah considered lying, giving him the same answer she gave everyone who asked, that she loved her job, was proud of her success, and felt fulfilled by her achievements. But something about Marcus's honesty made her want to be equally truthful. I'm accomplished, she said finally. I'm respected in my field, financially secure, and I can take care of myself and help my family when they need it. But happy? I'm not sure I remember what that feels like anymore. What did it used to feel like? Marcus asked gently. Sarah thought back to earlier periods of her life, before work consumed everything. Light, she said after a moment, like there was space for spontaneity and wonder, like the world was full of possibilities instead of just deadlines and obligations. Maybe it still is, Marcus suggested. Maybe you just need to remember how to look for them. As the evening wound down, Sarah realized that something fundamental had shifted during their time together. For the first time in years, she had spent hours focused entirely on the present moment rather than mentally preparing for the next day's tasks. She had laughed, relaxed, and connected with another person in a way that felt authentic and meaningful. When Marcus drove her back to her car at the restaurant, they sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, neither quite ready to end the evening. This was really wonderful, Sarah said finally. Thank you for showing me something different. Thank you for being open to it, Marcus replied. And for dinner? It was the best meal I've had in a long time. Would you like to do this again sometime? Sarah asked, then immediately worried she sounded too eager. I mean, if you're interested in exploring more of Seattle together. I feel like I've been missing out on my own city. I'd love that, Marcus said warmly. Maybe next time you can show me something from your world. As Sarah drove home, she found herself thinking not about the presentation she needed to finish or the meeting she had scheduled for Monday, but about the way Marcus had listened to her with complete attention and the way he seemed to find contentment in simple pleasures that she had forgotten how to appreciate. For the first time in months, she fell asleep easily, without the usual anxiety about the next day's challenges. Instead, she drifted off thinking about fountain displays and live music and the surprising comfort of being truly seen by someone who asked for nothing in return. Marcus, meanwhile, lay in his own bed thinking about the evening with a mixture of happiness and uncertainty. Sarah was everything he had sensed she would be, intelligent, thoughtful, and more vulnerable than her professional success suggested. But she was also part of a world that seemed impossibly different from his own. Still, as he replayed their conversations and remembered the way she had laughed at the fountain, Marcus allowed himself to hope that their connection might be the beginning of something meaningful. Sometimes the most unlikely combinations created the most beautiful results, and perhaps Sarah Martinez and Marcus Chun were proof of that possibility. Neither of them could have predicted how profoundly their lives were about to change, or how the simple act of stepping outside their respective comfort zones would lead them toward a love that would challenge everything they thought they knew about themselves and what they wanted from life. 3 weeks after their evening at the Seattle Center, Sarah found herself looking forward to her lunch breaks in a way she never had before. She and Marcus had begun meeting regularly, sometimes for coffee between her morning meetings and his afternoon sleep, other times for weekend adventures that Marcus planned with the same thoughtful attention he brought to everything else in his life. Their friendship had developed an easy rhythm that surprised them both. Marcus would text her recommendations for hidden gems around the city, a tiny bookstore in Fremont that stayed open late, a food truck near Pike Place Market that served the best Korean tacos she'd ever tasted, a hiking trail in Discovery Park that offered stunning views of Puget Sound without the crowds of the more popular routes. Sarah, in return, had begun sharing her world with him, taking him to art gallery openings, introducing him to her favorite Ethiopian restaurant, and even inviting him to a networking event that turned out to be far more enjoyable with his wry commentary about corporate social dynamics. What struck Sarah most about spending time with Marcus was how present he was in every moment. While she was constantly checking her phone, mentally preparing for the next meeting, or worrying about projects, Marcus gave his full attention to whatever they were doing. When they visited the bookstore, he actually browsed the shelves instead of rushing to find a specific title. When they hiked, he noticed birds and plants and took time to appreciate views instead of treating the walk as exercise to be completed efficiently. "You're going to think I'm crazy," Sarah said one Thursday afternoon as they shared lunch at a small cafe near her office, "but I've started trying to be more like you." Marcus looked up from his sandwich with raised eyebrows. "That definitely sounds like it could go badly. What exactly are you trying to copy?" "The way you pay attention," Sarah explained. "Yesterday, instead of eating lunch at my desk while answering emails, I actually went to the break room and sat by the window. I watched people walking by on the street below and realized I work in a building I've never really looked at from the inside. And it was nice," Sarah admitted. "Relaxing even. I think I got more work done in the afternoon because I had actually taken a break instead of just switching between different types of work." Marcus smiled. "That's not crazy at all. It's just basic human maintenance. You can't run at full speed constantly without burning out." "Tell that to my boss," Sarah said with a laugh, but Marcus caught the underlying stress in her voice. "Is work getting more difficult since your promotion?" he asked. Sarah sighed. "Not more difficult, exactly, but more demanding. I have a bigger team now, more high-profile clients, and everyone expects me to be available constantly. Sometimes I feel like I'm successful on paper, but losing pieces of myself in the process." "What pieces?" Marcus asked gently. Sarah thought about it while sipping her coffee. "Time with my family. Hobbies I used to enjoy. The ability to read a book just for pleasure instead of for professional development. Hell, even just the ability to sit still without feeling guilty about not being productive." Marcus was quiet for a moment, and Sarah worried she was complaining too much. Most people would see her problems as luxurious, the challenges of success rather than real hardships. "Can I tell you something?" Marcus said finally. "When I first started working nights, I thought I was giving up everything that mattered: my career trajectory, my social life, the respect that comes with a prestigious job. But I actually gained things I didn't expect. Time to think, the satisfaction of doing work that immediately improves someone's day, the ability to help my family without resentment, because I chose it rather than having it forced on me." "I'm not sure I can make the choices you made," Sarah said honestly. "I've been focused on career success for so long that I'm not sure who I am without it." "You don't have to give up your career," Marcus pointed out. "But Maybe you could give up some of the things that make it consume your whole life. What if you set boundaries? What if you decided that some evenings were off limits for work, or that you wouldn't check email after a certain time? Your clients expect what you train them to expect, Marcus interrupted gently. If you're always available, they'll always demand availability. But if you set clear boundaries and stick to them, most people will respect that. Sarah stared at him. You make it sound so simple. Simple doesn't mean easy, Marcus clarified. But it is possible. The question is whether you want the life you have now, or whether you want to create space for something different. The conversation stayed with Sarah for the rest of the week. She found herself paying attention to her habits and reactions, noticing how automatically she reached for her phone during any quiet moment, how often she said yes to requests that weren't truly urgent, and how rarely she did anything that was purely for her own enjoyment. That Friday evening, instead of staying late to get ahead on Monday's tasks, Sarah made a decision. She packed up her desk at exactly 6 o'clock and drove to Marcus's apartment building. She had never visited him at home before, but she wanted to take him up on his standing invitation to cook dinner together instead of always meeting at restaurants. Marcus lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, and when he answered the door, his surprise at seeing her was mixed with obvious pleasure. I hope you don't mind me dropping by, Sarah said, holding up a bag of groceries. I decided to take you up on that offer to cook together, and I brought ingredients for pasta. Of course I don't mind, Marcus said, stepping aside to let her in. I was just grading some programming exercises for an online course I'm taking. Perfect timing. Sarah looked around Marcus's apartment with interest. It was small, but thoughtfully arranged, with furniture that was clearly chosen for comfort and functionality rather than style. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with an eclectic mix of technical manuals, classic literature, and what appeared to be his sister's old textbooks. The kitchen was tiny but well-organized, with herbs growing on the windowsill and cooking tools that showed signs of regular use. This is really nice, Sarah said, meaning it. The space felt lived in and peaceful, a reflection of Marcus's personality in the same way her office reflected hers. It's not much, but it works for me, Marcus replied, taking the grocery bag from her. What are we making? I thought we'd try carbonara, Sarah said. I've never made it from scratch, but I found a recipe that looked manageable. They worked together in the small kitchen, Marcus teaching Sarah techniques his mother had shown him, while Sarah contributed organizational skills that kept them from overwhelming the limited counter space. The process was more enjoyable than Sarah had expected. There was something meditative about the simple, physical tasks of chopping, stirring, and timing that contrasted beautifully with her usual day of abstract problem-solving and digital communication. Can I ask you something? Sarah said as they waited for water to boil. Do you ever feel like you're settling? I mean, you're clearly brilliant, and you could probably have any job you wanted in tech. Don't you feel like you're wasting your potential? Marcus considered her question while grating Parmesan cheese. I used to, he said, but I've come to realize that potential isn't just about reaching the highest possible level in a traditional career path. It's about using your abilities in ways that align with your values and contribute to the kind of life you actually want to live. But don't you want recognition? Achievement? The satisfaction of knowing you succeeded at something difficult? I get all of those things, Marcus said with a smile. When I help my sister understand a concept she's struggling with, when I solve a programming problem in my online courses, when I see that someone's day is a little better because I took extra care with their workspace. Success doesn't have to look like a corner office and a six-figure salary. Sarah absorbed his words while watching him work. There was a confidence in his movements, a sense of purpose that she envied. I think I've been measuring success all wrong, she said quietly. Not wrong, Marcus corrected, just by someone else's standards instead of your own. As they ate dinner by Marcus's living room window, Sarah realized she was seeing the city from yet another new angle. His apartment looked out on a residential street lined with old trees, where neighbors walked their dogs and children played in small front yards. It was quieter than her downtown high-rise, more connected to the rhythms of ordinary life. This neighborhood has such a different energy than where I live, she observed. What's your building like? Marcus asked. Modern, efficient, anonymous, Sarah said with a laugh. Beautiful views, top-notch security, and I don't think I've ever had a conversation with anyone who lives there. It's basically a luxury hotel that I happen to sleep in. Do you like it? Sarah paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. I like the amenities and the location. But do I like living there? I'm not sure. I chose it because it was the kind of place a successful person was supposed to live, but I've never really thought about whether it makes me happy. After dinner, Marcus showed Sarah some of the programming projects he was working on in his spare time. He had developed a budgeting app designed specifically for families managing medical expenses, inspired by his experience with his father's illness. He was also contributing to an open-source project that helps small nonprofits manage their donor databases more effectively. This is incredible work, Sarah said, scrolling through his code on his laptop. Why aren't you trying to commercialize these apps? You could probably make a fortune. Maybe someday, Marcus said. But right now, I'm more interested in making sure they actually help people than in making money from them. The budgeting app is being used by about 50 families, and the feedback I get from them about how it's helped them manage their finances during health crises is worth more to me than any profit margin. Sarah stared at the testimonials Marcus had collected from users of his app. People wrote about how his work had reduced their stress during already difficult times, how it had helped them find financial stability they didn't think was possible, how grateful they were that someone cared enough to create something specifically for their needs. When was the last time you got feedback like this from your marketing campaigns? Marcus asked, noticing her expression. Never, Sarah admitted. I get reports about conversion rates and return on investment, but I never hear from actual people about how my work affects their lives. That doesn't mean your work isn't valuable, Marcus said quickly. It just means the value is more abstract, harder to see directly. Maybe that's part of the problem, Sarah said thoughtfully. Maybe I need work that lets me see the human impact more clearly. They spent the rest of the evening talking about different ways to find meaning in work, with Marcus sharing stories from online forums where programmers discussed balancing financial necessity with personal fulfillment, and Sarah talking about marketing campaigns she had worked on that she was particularly proud of, usually the ones for nonprofits or small businesses rather than large corporations. When Sarah finally left around 11 o'clock, she realized she had spent the entire evening without checking her email even once. She had been completely present in the conversation and the experience, and it felt like a small victory. Thank you for tonight, she said as Marcus walked her to her car. I can't remember the last time I spent an evening doing something just because I enjoyed it. Thank you for coming over, Marcus replied. It was nice to share my space with someone who appreciates it. There was something in the way he said it that made Sarah pause. Over the past few weeks, she had begun to recognize that her feelings for Marcus went beyond friendship and gratitude. She was drawn to his thoughtfulness, his different perspective on life, and the way he made her feel like she was interesting beyond her professional accomplishments. Marcus, she said impulsively, would you like to come to a work event with me next week? It's the annual client appreciation party, and I always dread going alone to these things. It would be nice to have someone there who doesn't care about impressing potential clients. Marcus looked surprised. Are you sure? Won't it be awkward to bring the night janitor to your company's fancy party? You're not the night janitor, Sarah said firmly. You're Marcus Chun, brilliant programmer, and the most thoughtful person I know. Anyone who has a problem with that isn't worth impressing. In that case, Marcus said with a smile, I'd be honored to be your date to the corporate party. The word date hung in the air between them, and Sarah felt her heart skip. Neither of them had explicitly acknowledged that their relationship was becoming romantic, but the possibility was clearly present for both of them. It's at the Fairmont Olympic next Friday, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice casual. Cocktail attire, probably overpriced drinks, and networking conversations. Sounds like an adventure, Marcus said diplomatically. As Sarah drove home, she found herself both excited and nervous about the prospect of introducing Marcus to her professional world. She cared about what he thought of her colleagues, but She was also beginning to realize she cared more about what her colleagues thought of him. Marcus was important to her in a way that went beyond their friendship, and the idea of sharing that with the people she worked with felt significant. The following week passed quickly, with Sarah finding herself looking forward to Friday evening in a way that had nothing to do with the end of the work week, and everything to do with the prospect of experiencing a familiar event through Marcus's eyes. She chose her outfit more carefully than usual. A black dress that was elegant, but not overly formal, paired with jewelry that was sophisticated but not ostentatious. She wanted to look professional, but not intimidating, successful, but not unapproachable. Most importantly, she wanted to look like herself, not like a corporate persona she put on for work functions. Marcus picked her up at her apartment, and when she opened the door, her breath caught. He wore a dark gray suit that fit him perfectly, with a blue shirt that brought out his eyes, and a tie that suggested he had put real thought into his appearance. He looked handsome and confident, but still unmistakably himself. "You look amazing," he said, offering her his arm. "So do you," Sarah replied, meaning it completely. The party was held in the Olympic Hotel's elegant ballroom, with soft lighting, tasteful decorations, and the kind of sophisticated atmosphere that Sarah was accustomed to but Marcus had never experienced. As they entered the room, Sarah noticed several colleagues looking their way with curiosity, and she felt a flutter of protective instinct toward Marcus. "This is definitely fancier than my usual Friday night," Marcus said quietly, taking in elaborate cocktail displays and formally dressed servers. "Just remember that underneath all the expensive clothes and impressive job titles, these are just people trying to make it through another work event," Sarah whispered back. Half of them would rather be home watching Netflix. They made their way to the bar, where Sarah ordered her usual white wine, and Marcus chose a craft beer. As they stood surveying the room, Sarah's boss, Jennifer Walsh, approached them with a kind of smile that was professional but genuinely warm. "Sarah, so glad you could make it," Jennifer said, then looked expectantly at Marcus. "Jennifer, I'd like you to meet Marcus Chun," Sarah said smoothly. "Marcus, this is my boss, Jennifer Walsh." "Pleasure to meet you," Marcus said, extending his hand with a confidence that impressed Sarah. "Are you in marketing as well?" Jennifer asked politely. "No, I'm in technology," Marcus replied, which was true if not complete. "I do programming and systems analysis." Sarah watched the interaction with interest, noting how Marcus presented himself without either overselling or underselling his background. He was comfortable in his own skin in a way that made the expensive setting seem less intimidating. Throughout the evening, Sarah introduced Marcus to various colleagues and clients, and she was consistently impressed by how well he handled himself. He asked intelligent questions about projects people were working on, offered thoughtful perspectives on technology challenges, and demonstrated the same careful attention to others that had drawn Sarah to him in the first place. "Your Marcus is charming," said Rebecca Chun, one of Sarah's team members, during a brief moment when Marcus was getting them fresh drinks. "Where's he been hiding?" "We met through work," Sarah said, which was technically true. "He's been a good friend for a while, but this is the first time I've brought him to a company event." "Well, he's definitely an upgrade from that banker you brought to the holiday party," Rebecca said with a grin. "This one actually listens when people talk to him." Sarah laughed, remembering the disastrous date she had brought to the previous year's party, who had spent the entire evening checking his phone and talking about cryptocurrency investments. The contrast with Marcus's genuine engagement with everyone he met was striking. The evening's highlight came when Marcus found himself in conversation with James Morrison, the company's biggest client and a man known for being particularly hard to please. Sarah watched from across the room as the two men talked animatedly about something, with James actually laughing at something Marcus had said. When Marcus returned to her side, Sarah was dying to know what they had discussed. "He was telling me about the challenges of managing inventory for his retail chain," Marcus explained. "I mentioned some of the database optimization techniques I've been learning about, and it turned out he's been looking for exactly that kind of solution. I might have accidentally given you some new business." You talked him into a new project in casual conversation? Sarah asked, amazed. I didn't talk him into anything, Marcus corrected. I just listened to what he needed and happened to know about some tools that might help. He's going to email you about setting up a proper consultation. Sarah stared at him. Do you realize you just did in 20 minutes what I've been trying to do for months? James never opens up about operational challenges in social settings. Maybe he needed someone to ask the right questions, Marcus suggested. Sometimes the best way to understand a problem is to come at it from a completely different angle. As the evening wound down, Sarah realized that bringing Marcus to her work event had been one of the best decisions she'd made in months. Not only had he enjoyed himself and impressed her colleagues, but he had also helped her see her professional world from a new perspective. His questions and observations had made her think about her work differently, and his success with James Morrison had reminded her that some of the most valuable insights come from outside traditional industry boundaries. Thank you for coming with me tonight, she said as they waited for their car outside the hotel. You were absolutely perfect. I had a wonderful time, Marcus replied. Your colleagues are interesting people, and I can see why you've been so successful. You have a real talent for bringing out the best in the people around you. I think you might have that backward, Sarah said with a smile. You're the one who brought out the best in everyone tonight, including me. As they drove back to Sarah's apartment, they talked about the evening's conversations and people, but underneath the casual debriefing, Sarah was aware of a shift in the energy between them. The line between friendship and something deeper had been growing thinner over the past few weeks, and tonight had brought them closer to acknowledging what was developing between them. When Marcus walked her to her apartment door, they both seemed reluctant to end the evening. Sarah, Marcus said softly, I need to tell you something. What is it? I'm falling in love with you, he said simply. I know we come from different worlds, and I know there are probably a dozen reasons why this doesn't make practical sense, but I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is just friendship. Sarah felt her heart race as she looked into his eyes. Marcus, she said, stepping closer to him, I've been hoping you would say that, because I'm falling in love with you too. He reached up to touch her face gently, and she leaned into his hand. Are you sure? He asked. Because once we cross this line, there's no going back to just being friends. I'm sure, Sarah whispered, and then he was kissing her, soft and sweet and full of all the feelings they had been carefully not acknowledging for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. This is going to complicate things, Sarah said, though she didn't sound concerned about it. The best things usually do, Marcus replied, pulling her close again. As Sarah finally went upstairs to her apartment that night, she realized that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't have imagined just a few months earlier. She was in love with a man who challenged every assumption she had made about success, happiness, and what she wanted from life. But for the first time in years, the uncertainty ahead felt like possibility rather than anxiety. Marcus, driving home through the quiet Seattle streets, found himself thinking about the evening with a sense of wonder. He had entered Sarah's professional world and not only survived, but thrived, earning respect and making connections that could benefit both of them. More importantly, he had finally acknowledged his feelings for Sarah, and she had reciprocated in ways that filled him with hope. The road ahead would require them both to navigate differences in background, lifestyle, and priorities, but as Marcus parked outside his apartment building, he felt ready for whatever challenges their relationship might bring. Some connections transcend circumstance, and what he and Sarah had discovered together felt strong enough to build a future on. Neither of them slept much that night, but for the first time in months, both of them were awake because they were too happy to sleep rather than too stressed to rest. 6 months into their relationship, Sarah and Marcus had settled into a rhythm that surprised both of them with its natural ease. They had learned to navigate their different schedules. Sarah leaving work early enough to have dinner with Marcus before his night shift began, Marcus adjusting his sleep schedule on weekends to spend full days together. Their worlds, which had once seemed impossibly different, had begun to blend in ways that enriched both their lives. Sarah had started incorporating Marcus's philosophy of mindful living into her work routine. She took actual lunch breaks, set boundaries on evening emails, and even convinced her boss to let her work from home 2 days a week. The changes had made her more productive rather than less, as Marcus had predicted, and her stress levels had decreased significantly. Marcus, meanwhile, had been inspired by Sarah's drive and ambition to pursue more challenging opportunities. He had completed 2 advanced programming certifications and was beginning to explore freelance projects that could eventually replace his cleaning job. Sarah's connections in the business world had already led to 3 consulting opportunities that allowed him to use his technical skills more directly. Their relationship had deepened in ways that went beyond romance. They had become genuine partners, supporting each other's goals while maintaining their individual identities. Sarah felt more grounded and purposeful than she had in years, while Marcus felt more confident about his potential for professional growth without sacrificing his values. But as spring turned to summer, both of them were becoming aware that their current arrangement had limitations. Marcus's night schedule meant they could never attend evening events together unless he called in sick to work. Sarah's demanding travel schedule for client meetings meant they sometimes went days without seeing each other. Most significantly, neither of them had been willing to discuss what their future might look like beyond the comfortable present they had created. The conversation that would change everything began on a Tuesday evening in late June, when Sarah arrived at Marcus's apartment to find him sitting at his kitchen table with his laptop, financial papers spread around him, and an expression of deep concentration on his face. "Sorry," he said, looking up when she entered. "I was going to clean this up before you got here, but I lost track of time." "What are you working on?" Sarah asked, settling into the chair across from him. Marcus hesitated for a moment, as if he wasn't sure how much to share. "I've been running numbers on what it would take for me to transition out of the cleaning job," he said finally. "The freelance programming work is picking up, and I'm starting to think it might be financially viable to make the switch." Sarah felt a surge of excitement for him. "That's wonderful. What do the numbers look like?" "Better than I expected, actually," Marcus said, showing her his calculations. "If I can maintain the client base I'm building and add maybe 2 more regular contracts, I could match my current income from cleaning. And there's potential for growth that doesn't exist in the service industry." Sarah studied his projections, impressed by his thorough analysis. "This looks very realistic," she said. "Have you thought about timeline?" "That's where it gets complicated," Marcus said, running his hand through his hair. "I could probably make the transition in about 4 months if everything goes according to plan. But there's something else I've been thinking about." "What?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah could sense that whatever he was about to say was important. "I've been offered a position," he said finally. "A good one. Senior developer role at a startup that's working on accessibility software. Great salary, equity options, the kind of opportunity one used to dream about." Sarah felt her heart leap with excitement for him, followed immediately by a sinking feeling as she processed the implications. "That's incredible, Marcus. When did this happen?" "The offer came through yesterday," Marcus said. "It's everything I thought I wanted professionally. The work is meaningful, the team is talented, and the compensation would change my family's financial situation completely." "But," Sarah prompted, hearing the hesitation in his voice. "But the company is based in Portland," Marcus said quietly. "They're willing to let me work remotely some of the time, but they want their senior developers in the office at least 3 days a week." Sarah felt as though the air had been knocked out of her lungs. Portland was only a 3-hour drive from Seattle, but it might as well have been across the country given their careers and responsibilities. "When would you need to start?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "They're hoping for September 1st, Marcus said, which gives me about 10 weeks to make a decision and get everything sorted out." They sat in silence for a few minutes, both of them processing what this opportunity meant for Marcus individually and for their relationship together. Sarah's mind was racing through possibilities, long-distance relationships, career changes, the logistics of maintaining what they had built across geographic distance. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked gently. I'm thinking this is an amazing opportunity for you, Sarah said honestly. And I'm also thinking about how much I'm going to miss you if you take it. I've been thinking about that too, Marcus admitted. Actually, I've been thinking about it so much that I almost turned down the interview before I had it. You can't do that, Sarah said immediately. You can't turn down opportunities like this because of me. Your career is just as important as mine. I know, Marcus said, but this relationship is important to me too. More important than I expected any relationship could be. Sarah reached across the table to take his hand. We'll figure out, she said, though she wasn't sure how. Long-distance relationships can work. People do it all the time. Can they? Marcus asked. With our schedules, with your travel, with both of us trying to build our careers, when would we see each other? Every other weekend, if we're lucky. Sarah didn't have a good answer to that. She had seen colleagues attempt long-distance relationships, and most of them had failed under the pressure of competing priorities and limited time together. Maybe, Sarah said slowly, we should think about alternatives, such as... Sarah took a deep breath, hardly believing what she was about to suggest. Such as me coming with you. Marcus stared at her. What do you mean? I mean, maybe this is an opportunity for both of us to make changes, Sarah said, the idea gaining momentum as she spoke. I've been feeling stuck in my current role anyway. I have enough experience and connections now that I could probably find work in Portland or maybe even start my own consulting firm. Sarah, Marcus said carefully, you can't uproot your entire life because I got a job offer. Your career is here. Your team depends on you. You just got promoted. My career is portable, Sarah pointed out. Marketing skills transfer anywhere, and most of my best clients work with multiple agencies anyway. Some of them might even follow me if I went independent. But your apartment, your routines, your support system are all things I can rebuild, Sarah interrupted. Marcus, I've spent the last few months learning how to live differently, how to prioritize things that actually matter to me instead of just chasing the next achievement. You're what matters to me. This relationship is what matters to me. Marcus was quiet for a long time, and Sarah could see him working through the implications of what she was suggesting. I can't ask you to do that, he said finally. You're not asking, Sarah said firmly. I'm offering. Actually, I'm more than offering. I'm excited about the possibility. Excited about leaving everything you've built here. Excited about building something new, Sarah corrected. With you. For the first time in my adult life, I have a chance to make choices based on what I actually want instead of what I think I'm supposed to want. That's incredibly liberating. Marcus studied her face, looking for signs of doubt or reluctance. Are you sure this isn't just a romantic impulse? Moving across state lines for a relationship is a big decision. It's not just for the relationship, Sarah said, realizing as she spoke that it was true. It's for me too. Portland has a great business scene, lower cost of living, and a culture that might be more aligned with the way I want to live my life now. Plus, I've always wanted to try running my own business, and this might be the perfect opportunity to take that risk. They talked until nearly midnight, working through the practical considerations of such a major life change. Sarah would need to give notice at her job, find a way out of her lease, and research the Portland market for her skills. Marcus would need to accept the position and find housing that could accommodate both of them, at least initially. There's one more thing we should talk about, Marcus said as they were getting ready for bed. What's that? If we're going to make this kind of commitment to each other, to relocating together and building a life in a new city, then we should probably talk about what we want that life to look like. Sarah felt her heart rate increase. They were approaching territory they had been carefully avoiding. The future of their relationship beyond the comfortable present tense they had been living in. What do you mean specifically, she asked. I mean, are we talking about moving in together temporarily while we figure things out? Or are we talking about building something permanent together? Sarah looked at Marcus, this man who had appeared in her life so unexpectedly and changed everything about how she understood love, partnership, and what she wanted from life. 6 months earlier, she couldn't have imagined having this conversation with anyone. She had been focused entirely on her individual success, convinced that relationships were obstacles to achievement rather than enhancements to life. I think, she said slowly, that I want to build something permanent with you. I want to see what our life looks like when we're both pursuing work we care about in a place we choose together. I want to find out what happens when we stop having to work around scheduling conflicts and geographic distance." Marcus smiled, and Sarah saw relief and joy in his expression. "I want that too," he said. "I want to wake up next to you without having to calculate how many hours of sleep I can get before my night shift. I want to cook dinner together without worrying about whether it's cutting into your work time. I want to plan a future that includes both of us." "So we're really doing this?" Sarah asked. "We're moving to Portland together?" "If you're sure," Marcus said. "If you really think this is what you want, and not just what you think you should want because you care about me." Sarah considered the question seriously. Was she sure? The logical part of her brain was listing all the risks: leaving a secure job, starting over in a new city, committing to a relationship that was still relatively new. But the deeper part of her, the part that had been slowly awakening over the past months of learning to live differently, was absolutely certain. "I'm sure," she said. "For the first time in my adult life, I'm making a decision based on what will make me happy instead of what will look impressive on a resume. That feels like growth, not impulsiveness." Marcus pulled her close, and they held each other in the quiet of his small apartment, both of them processing the magnitude of what they had just decided. The next few weeks passed in a blur of planning and preparation. Sarah gave notice at her job, surprising everyone, including herself, by feeling relieved rather than anxious about leaving. She began researching Portland's business community and reaching out to contacts who might have connections there. Marcus accepted the position with the startup and began the process of relocating. The hardest part was telling their families. Marcus's sister was thrilled that he was finally getting the kind of opportunity he deserved, but worried about him leaving their father. Sarah's parents were supportive, but concerned about her leaving a secure position for what they saw as an uncertain future. "I just want to make sure you're not sacrificing your career for a man," Sarah's mother said during one of their conversations about the move. "I'm not sacrificing my career, Mom," Sarah explained. "I'm redirecting it towards something that might be more fulfilling. And I'm not doing it for Marcus. I'm doing it with Marcus." "There's a difference." "Is there?" her mother asked skeptically. "Yes," Sarah said firmly. "When you sacrifice for someone, you give up something important to you. When you redirect with someone, you're choosing a path that serves both your individual goals and your shared life. Marcus isn't asking me to give up anything. He's giving me the opportunity to pursue dreams I didn't even know I had." As moving day approached, Sarah found herself increasingly excited rather than nervous. She had lined up 3 potential clients in Portland, including one referral from James Morrison, the difficult client Marcus had charmed at her company party. She had also connected with a network of female entrepreneurs in the city who were enthusiastic about welcoming a new marketing consultant to their community. Marcus, meanwhile, had found a small house in Portland's Hawthorne district that they could rent together. It had a home office for Sarah's consulting work, a larger space where Marcus could set up his computer setup, and a garden where they could grow vegetables together. It was the kind of place where they could build the integrated life they both wanted. The night before their move, they sat in Sarah's mostly empty apartment, surrounded by boxes and feeling the weight of the transition ahead of them. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked. Sarah looked around at the space that had represented her independent, career-focused life, then looked at Marcus, who represented the possibility of something richer and more balanced. "None," she said without hesitation. "What about you?" "Just one," Marcus said with a smile. "What?" "I regret that it took me so long to realize that taking care of your office was just the beginning of wanting to take care of you." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes at the sweetness of his words. "Well, you've got plenty of time to make up for it now. A lifetime, if I'm lucky," Marcus said, pulling her close. As they spent their last night in Seattle, both Sarah and Marcus were aware that they were closing one chapter of their lives and opening another. The move to Portland wasn't just a geographic transition. It was a commitment to building a life together based on shared values rather than individual achievements. They had started as 2 people whose worlds intersected only in the quiet hours after midnight, when Marcus cleaned Sarah's office, and she worked late into the evening. Now they were partners choosing to create a new world together, one where work served life instead of consuming it, and where love was expressed through daily acts of care and attention. The next morning, as they loaded the last boxes into the moving truck, Sarah looked back at the Seattle skyline one more time. She felt grateful for everything the city had given her: education, career opportunities, the confidence to succeed in a competitive field. But she was also excited about what lay ahead. "Ready?" Marcus asked, holding out his hand to help her into the truck. "Ready," Sarah said, taking his hand and stepping toward their future together. As they drove south toward Portland, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that night when Marcus had gently woken her from sleep at her desk. She had been so focused on external measures of success that she had forgotten to ask whether she was actually happy. Marcus had helped her remember that the most important question wasn't whether she was achieving enough, but whether she was living in alignment with her values and building relationships that nourished her soul. Portland awaited them with opportunities they couldn't yet imagine, challenges they would face together, and the possibility of creating a life that honored both their individual dreams and their shared commitment to each other. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, uncertainty felt like adventure rather than anxiety. Marcus, driving through the familiar landscape between two cities that had both shaped him, felt a deep sense of gratitude for the unexpected path that had brought him to this moment. He had started as a night janitor, taking extra care with one particular office, never imagining that those small acts of attention would lead to the love of his life and a career opportunity beyond his dreams. As they crossed the bridge over the Columbia River into Oregon, both Sarah and Marcus were thinking about the same thing. Not the destination they were driving toward, but the journey they had taken together to get there. Sometimes the most profound changes in life begin with the smallest gestures of care, and sometimes the question, "Could we start here?" opens the door to everything you never knew you wanted. Their story was far from over, but as they drove toward Portland together, surrounded by their belongings and their hopes for the future, both of them knew they had already found the most important thing: a love built on mutual respect, shared values, and the courage to choose happiness over convention. 2 years after their move to Portland, Sarah stood in the sunny kitchen of their rented house, preparing breakfast while Marcus worked in the small office they had converted from the house's former dining room. The morning routine they had developed felt as natural as breathing. Sarah would start coffee and breakfast while Marcus wrapped up any overnight work calls with East Coast clients, and then they would eat together before starting their respective days. The life they had built in Portland had exceeded both of their expectations in ways they couldn't have anticipated. Sarah's consulting business, Martina's strategic marketing, was thriving beyond her wildest projections. She had found that Portland's collaborative business culture suited her perfectly, and her reputation for innovative, ethical marketing strategies had attracted clients from across the Pacific Northwest and beyond. More importantly, she had discovered that running her own business allowed her to choose projects that aligned with her values, helping sustainable businesses grow, supporting nonprofits with their fundraising campaigns, and working with companies that prioritized employee well-being alongside profit. Marcus had settled into his role at Accessible Solutions with enthusiasm and rapid success. The startup was developing software to help people with disabilities navigate digital interfaces more easily, and Marcus's thoughtful approach to user experience had made him invaluable to the team. He had been promoted twice in his 2 years with the company, and his colleagues frequently sought his input on projects outside his direct responsibilities. The work felt meaningful in a way that reminded him daily why he had chosen to take the risk of leaving Seattle. But the professional success, gratifying as it was, paled in comparison to what they had built together personally. Their relationship had deepened and matured in the space created by their more balanced lifestyles. They could attend events together, take weekend trips without worrying about conflicting schedules, and most importantly, they had time and energy for the small daily interactions that build intimacy, cooking together, talking about their work, sharing books and ideas, and simply being present with each other. This particular morning felt special, though Sarah couldn't quite put her finger on why. Marcus had been unusually quiet the night before, claiming he was preoccupied with a challenging project at work, but Sarah had caught him looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. There was something in his manner that suggested he was planning something, though she had no idea what. The Hendersons' event space is booked for next Saturday. Marcus called from his office, referencing the wedding venue where Sarah's friend Emma was planning to get married the following month. Emma asked me to let you know they're available if you want to do a final walkthrough before the ceremony. Perfect, Sarah called back. I'll text her this afternoon to set up a time. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, laptop under his arm, and an expression of barely contained anticipation on his face. Actually, he said, I was thinking we could drive out there this morning if you don't have anything pressing. I know you've been wanting to see the space again, and the weather's supposed to be beautiful. Sarah looked at him with surprise. The Henderson property was about 40 minutes outside Portland, and while it was indeed a beautiful location, it seemed like an odd suggestion for a Thursday morning when they both had work to do. Don't you have that big client call at 10? She asked. I moved it to this afternoon, Marcus said, setting his laptop on the counter. I thought it might be nice to get out of the city for a few hours. We could have lunch at that little cafe we liked in McMinnville. Something about his tone made Sarah pause. Marcus was spontaneous in many ways, but he rarely suggested impromptu day trips during the work week. Still, the idea was appealing, and she had learned to trust Marcus's instincts about when they needed to step away from their responsibilities. Okay, she said, smiling at his obvious enthusiasm. Let me just check my calendar and make sure nothing urgent is happening with clients today. An hour later, they were driving through the rolling hills of Yamhill County, windows down, and music playing while Sarah enjoyed the scenery she rarely took time to appreciate during her usual rush between meetings and obligations. Marcus seemed more relaxed than he had in days, chatting easily about everything from the farms they passed to plans for their small garden back home. The Henderson property was even more beautiful than Sarah remembered from Emma's initial tour. The event space was situated on a hillside overlooking vineyards and oak groves, with the Coast Range Mountains visible in the distance. The main building was a converted barn with rustic elegance, featuring exposed beams, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a wraparound porch perfect for outdoor ceremonies. Emma made a good choice, Sarah said as they walked around the grounds. This is going to be perfect for her wedding. It really is, Marcus agreed, but Sarah noticed he seemed to be paying more attention to her reactions than to the scenery itself. They spent an hour exploring the property, talking about Emma's wedding plans, and imagining how the space would look decorated for the ceremony. Marcus was unusually attentive to details, asking questions about the layout and logistics that seemed more thorough than necessary for a casual visit. There's one more thing I wanted to show you, Marcus said as they were preparing to leave. The caretaker mentioned there's a hiking trail behind the main building that leads to a viewpoint. Want to check it out? Sarah glanced at her watch, thinking about the client emails she should probably be answering, but Marcus's eagerness was infectious. Sure, she said. A short hike sounds nice. The trail was well-maintained and gently sloped, winding through a grove of oak trees before emerging onto a hillside meadow with sweeping views of the valley below. It was the kind of vista that demanded a moment of stillness, and they stood together in comfortable silence, taking in the beauty of the Oregon landscape spread out before them. Sarah, Marcus said softly, and something in his voice made her turn to look at him. He was no longer standing beside her. Instead, he was down on one knee, a small velvet box in his hands, looking up at her with an expression of love and nervousness that took her breath away. Marcus, she whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. Sarah Martinez, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion clearly visible on his face. 2 years ago, you changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. You saw potential in me that I didn't even see in myself. You challenged me to think bigger about what I wanted from life, And then you had the courage to rebuild your own life around what actually mattered to you. Tears were already starting in Sarah's eyes as she listened to his words. You've taught me that love isn't just about caring for someone, Marcus continued. It's about creating a life together that brings out the best in both people. It's about being partners in the truest sense, supporting each other's dreams while building something neither of us could create alone. He opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring with a single diamond that caught the morning light and sparkled like captured sunbeams. I want to spend the rest of my life taking care of you the way I learned to take care of your office, paying attention to what you need, making sure you have what supports you, and creating spaces where you could be your best self. But more than that, I want us to take care of each other and build a life that reflects both of our values. Sarah was crying openly now, but she was also smiling wider than she had ever smiled in her life. Sarah, will you marry me? Yes, she said immediately, dropping her knees in front of him so they were at eye level. Yes, absolutely yes. Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that were shaking slightly, and then they were holding each other in the Oregon meadow, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. I can't believe you planned all this, Sarah said when they finally pulled apart enough to speak. I've been thinking about it for months, Marcus admitted, but I wanted to wait until I was sure we had really built something sustainable together, not just survive the transition from Seattle. And now you're sure? I'm sure that what we have is real, Marcus said firmly. I'm sure that we work well together as partners in life, not just as people who love each other. And I'm sure that I want to keep building this life with you for as long as we both shall live. Sarah looked at the ring on her finger, then at Marcus's face, then out at the beautiful landscape around them. Everything felt perfect in a way that she had never experienced before. Not the artificial perfection of a carefully planned corporate event or a flawlessly executed marketing campaign, but the organic perfection of a moment that had grown naturally out of love, trust, and genuine partnership. Can I tell you something? She said, taking Marcus's hands in hers. Anything. 3 years ago, if someone had told me I would be engaged to a night janitor in a meadow in Oregon, I would have thought they were describing someone else's life. But this feels more right than anything I've ever done. Marcus laughed. 3 years ago, if someone had told me that the woman whose office I cleaned would become the love of my life and the partner I wanted to build a future with, I would have said they were crazy. And now I think we're proof that the best things in life happen when you're paying attention to the small details and staying open to possibilities you never imagined. They spent another hour in the meadow, talking about their engagement, their hopes for their wedding, and their dreams for their future together. Sarah called Emma to share the news and to ask if they could possibly book the Henderson property for their own wedding the following year. Marcus called his sister, who screamed with excitement so loudly that Sarah could hear her through the phone. As they drove back to Portland that afternoon, Sarah found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with Marcus's quiet acts of care in an office building after midnight, continued through tentative conversations and shared meals, deepened through the courage to take risks together, and now culminated in a commitment to build a life that honored both of their values and dreams. Can I ask you something? She said to Marcus as they navigated the highway back toward the city. Of course. That night, when you helped me with the presentation, when you asked if I was happy, did you already know you were falling in love with me? Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering the question. I think I was already intrigued by you, he said finally. I had been watching you work so hard, caring so much about doing things well, and I was curious about the person behind all that dedication. But I don't think I realized I was falling in love until I saw you at the fountain that first night we spent together. Watching you discover that you could enjoy something simple and spontaneous, seeing you laugh without worrying about what came next. That's when I knew you were someone I wanted to keep getting to know. What about you? Marcus asked. When did you know? Sarah thought about it as they passed familiar landmarks on their way home. I think it was gradual, she said. But there was a moment at your apartment when you showed me the apps you'd created to help people, when I realized that you had found a way to use your talents in service of something larger than yourself. That's when I knew you were different from anyone I'd ever met, and that different was exactly what I needed. Different how? Different in that you measured success by how much good you could do rather than how much recognition you could get. Different in that you paid attention to what people needed instead of just what they asked for. Different in that you could see potential in situations that looked ordinary on the surface. Marcus reached over to take her hand, the new engagement ring catching the afternoon light streaming through the car windows. "I still can't quite believe this is real," Sarah said, looking at their joined hands. "What part of it?" "All of it. The fact that we found each other, that we were brave enough to change our whole lives to be together, that we're actually compatible in all the ways that matter. It feels like too much good fortune for one person." "Maybe," Marcus said with a smile, "but I prefer to think we created our own good fortune by being willing to pay attention to what was really important." As they pulled into the driveway of their rented house, Sarah realized that she was looking forward to the evening ahead, calling their families, opening a bottle of champagne they had been saving for a special occasion, and simply enjoying the happiness of their engagement. For someone who had spent years rushing toward the next achievement, the next deadline, the next goal, the prospect of an evening dedicated entirely to celebration felt luxurious. Marcus, carrying Sarah's purse and his laptop bag from the car, paused to look at the small garden they had planted together in their backyard. The tomatoes were beginning to ripen, the herbs they used for cooking were flourishing, and the sunflowers Sarah had insisted on planting were reaching toward the sky with faces the size of dinner plates. "Look at what we've grown," he said, nodding toward the garden. "In the garden, you mean?" Sarah asked. "In the garden, in our careers, in our relationship," Marcus clarified. "Look at everything that's flourished since we decided to plant roots together." Sarah followed his gaze to their small but thriving garden, then looked at the house where they had built a life together, then at Marcus himself, this man who had started as a careful observer of her workspace and had become her partner in reimagining what life could look like when it was built around love and intentionality rather than ambition and achievement. "You're right," she said, slipping her arm through his as they walked toward their front door. "We've grown something beautiful." That evening, as they sat on their back porch with glasses of champagne, watching the sunset paint the Portland sky in shades of pink and gold, Sarah and Marcus talked about their wedding plans, their hopes for married life, and the small miracle of having found in each other exactly what they needed to become their best selves. "I have a confession," Sarah said as the first stars began to appear overhead. "What's that?" "I used to think that falling in love was something that happened to people who weren't focused enough on their careers. I thought it was a distraction from the important business of achieving and succeeding. And now I think falling in love with the right person is the most important achievement of all. Not because it completes you or fixes your problems, but because it creates the foundation for building a life that actually matters." Marcus pulled her closer on the porch swing they had installed shortly after moving in. "I love you, Sarah Martinez," he said simply. "I love you too, Marcus Chun," she replied. "And I love the life we've built together." As they sat together in the peaceful evening, surrounded by the garden they had planted and the future they had chosen, both Sarah and Marcus were aware that their story had come full circle. It had begun with Marcus taking extra care with Sarah's workspace, motivated by respect for her dedication and curiosity about the person behind the professional success. Now they were preparing to create a shared space, not just a physical home, but a life built around mutual care, attention to what mattered, and the courage to prioritize love over convention. The next morning, Sarah woke up early and found Marcus already in the kitchen, making coffee and checking his phone for messages from East Coast clients. It was a scene that had been repeated hundreds of times since they moved to Portland, but this morning it felt different. This morning, they were engaged, officially committed to building a future together, and surrounded by the evidence of how much their lives had grown and flourished since they had taken the risk of love. "Good morning, fiancé," Sarah said, wrapping her arms around Marcus from behind as he stood at the counter. "Good morning, future wife," Marcus replied, leaning back into her embrace. As they shared breakfast and planned their day, Sarah had client calls. Marcus had a team meeting about a new product launch. Both of them were aware that the simple domestic rhythms they had created together were the foundation for everything else they wanted to build. They had learned that love wasn't just a feeling, but a practice expressed through daily acts of attention, care, and commitment to each other's well-being and growth. Later that day, as Sarah worked in her home office and Marcus collaborated with his team via video conference, they would exchange smiles when their paths crossed in the hallway, and both of them would feel grateful for the unexpected journey that had brought them to this place of happiness and partnership. Their story had started with a simple question: could we start here? Asked by a woman who had fallen asleep at her desk and awakened to find someone who cared enough to make sure she was safe. It had continued through months of discovery, risk-taking, and the gradual building of trust and love. And now it was entering a new chapter, one in which they would face whatever came next together, supported by the knowledge that they had already overcome the greatest challenge of all: finding in each other a partner worthy of their love and capable of creating a life together that honored both their individual dreams and their shared values. As the sun set on their first day as an engaged couple, Sarah and Marcus were both thinking about the same thing. Not the wedding they would plan or the future challenges they would face, but the profound gratitude they felt for having found each other across the vast space of an ordinary office building on an ordinary weeknight, and for having been brave enough to build something extraordinary together. Some love stories begin with grand romantic gestures. Others begin with someone noticing that your plant needs water, that your desk lamp could be better, that you're working too hard, and forgetting to take care of yourself. Sometimes the most lasting love grows out of the smallest acts of attention and care, nurtured by two people who are willing to see each other clearly and build a life together based on mutual respect, shared values, and the revolutionary idea that love should make both people more themselves, not less. Sarah and Marcus had learned that the question, could we start here, wasn't just about location or timing. It was about the willingness to begin something new together, to take risks for the possibility of something better, and to trust that love, when it's built on the right foundation, can transform not just individual lives, but the very definition of what it means to live well. As they settled into sleep that night, both of them wearing the satisfied exhaustion that comes from a day full of joy and gratitude, Sarah and Marcus were already looking forward to the morning when they would wake up together and continue building the life they had chosen to create together. They had started in an office after midnight, but they were building something that would last a lifetime.